It is an interesting question. Why are some marriages happier than others?
And more importantly, maybe if your marriage isn't as happy as it could be, what can you do? Dr. Gourgouris has worked with thousands of individuals and couples, and he's come up with what he calls the 4 cornerstones of a thriving marriage.
So tell us, why are some marriages happier than others?
That's very easy to answer, actually. They make more deposits more consistently than they make withdrawals.
More deposits consistently than they make withdrawals.
Yeah, I'm picturing a bank there, but it's sort of like the same kind of thing, right?
It's exactly the same thing. Yeah, if you make more deposits and less withdrawals, you're going to be happier.
Okay, what's a deposit in a marriage?
A deposit would be the love languages, learning to speak the love languages that we'll talk about in a little bit, communication, forgiveness. These are some of the cornerstones of success. So that's, if you do this consistently, that's the key. Most people do more deposits before they get married and very few withdrawals, and then they get married. And in my experience, having worked with thousands of couples, after people get married, they start lessening the deposits and they start increasing the withdrawals. And at some point, you're living paycheck to emotional paycheck. So when there's a crisis that happens, then that's when you have a difficulty.
So all my deposits before I got married, I'm way overdrawn at this point, right? Okay.
Well, unfortunately, that's what happens. And I don't know why we do that. We think the whole goal was to get married. And really, the whole goal is to have joy in our life after we get married, not just to get to the altar.
Okay, you mentioned the cornerstones. We're going to dive into those right now. The first you say is communication, and even more than that, listening with a third ear.
Listening with a third ear. Most people think to be able to communicate well is to be able to talk, but really the best part of communication is listening. And a lot of times you have to listen to what's not being said. So a lot of couples share with one another their kind of superficially, if you will, and they miss out and they miscommunicate. Then they begin to try to interpret what they're trying to say with one another, and that rarely is ever accurate.
They try to guess what's not being said, so to speak?
So when I say to married couples, nobody has ESP. Ask, clarify, retort back. I guess what you're trying to say is this. Am I hearing you correctly? And that's when you have a successful relationship. Otherwise, you misinterpret one another and you have different expectations. That's when feelings get hurt.
Yeah, I can't imagine miscommunication in a marriage. Like every day it happens out there. Okay, your second cornerstone, you talk about forgiveness, and the quicker the better in a case like this, right?
Because if you're planning on staying together with somebody and eventually you're going to forgive, why wait 5 weeks or even 5 days? Why not do it in 5 hours or five minutes, actually? Why delay that? Because the longer you delay, the more pain you cause one another.
But how do you convey then that it's sincere? That maybe, hey, I'll forgive you in 5 minutes, but I really mean it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, you have to feel it in your heart, number one. And you have to acknowledge when I was first married with my wife, we had like the same fight 3 times. It was exactly the same. I mean, you could Xerox the fight, email the fight. It was like the same hurt feelings, the same, slam doors. And at some point, I had this honest-to-goodness epiphany, which was, in your marriage, Ilya, would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? And up until then, it was all about being right. So if there was an argument, my whole point was to prove that I was right. If I'm always right, doesn't that make my wife always wrong? And if I claim that I love her, is that really loving when she's always wrong and she ends up crying? Then eventually I'm going to have to ask, I'm sorry, forgive me for this. So I realized I'd rather be happy than be right. And it has worked like a charm, really.
No, but it's that giving in, Ilya. It's the whole giving in, and okay, I know.
But being right is all about your ego and about you. Being, that's what it's all about, being right. But if you want to be happy, her happiness is as important to me as anything else.
Yeah, and the happy is more important than being right anyway, you're right.
And it probably has to be that conscious thought, day after day, the happiness versus the...
And I'm not saying that it's easy. I mean, you really have to work on it. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, don't just flip a switch and it happens. Your third cornerstone, you were talking a little bit earlier about understanding love languages, right?
Because we all speak different love languages. So when when we first got married, when we went through this, we realized that we feel like we're working so hard in this relationship, and yet we both feel like we're not getting our needs met. So maybe me being a guy or being Greek, or because of the environment that I grew up in, my love language was physical touch. And I'm not talking about sexual touch now. Was physical touch more like hugs and kisses, holding hands, and so on? Because that's the environment that I grew up in. That's what I saw my dad do with my mom. Well, she grew up in a whole different environment where they never expressed that. But her parents were extremely polite. So they said, thank you for everything, words of appreciation. So guess what happens the first 6 months? I'm hugging and kissing her to death, and she's thanking me even for the smallest things. You take out the garbage, thank you, honey, for taking out the garbage. Well, that didn't do it for me, though. So I said, let me understand this right. I've been making deposits for the last 6 months on a daily basis. How come in your account, if you will. I said, how come you don't know that I love you? And she said, wrong account. And then she said the same thing to me. I thank you for everything you do. How come you don't know that I love you? And I'm like, well, wrong account, because that wasn't my language. So we had to change that. And the very next day, she's a great cook. She made a delicious meal. I tasted it. I put the spoon down. I said, honey, thank you so much for dinner. I'm so grateful. And you know what happened? She got up. She came around. She gave me a big hug and a kiss. And I've been saying thank you ever since for the last 18 years. And that's the difference. So the key with love language is don't do what comes easy to you. Because I can do the hugs and kisses in my sleep. That comes easy. That's natural. I had to go outside of my comfort zone and really learn how to love her the way that she needed to feel loved, which was the words of appreciation and the thank yous and expressing gratitude. And she had to learn to be more physically, affectionate, because she didn't know how to do that because she had never seen it.
Your final cornerstone is finances, and this is something that I think a lot of couples
especially right now.
It's a biggie. It's a biggie.
So the biggest thing with finances is making mutual decisions for the big stuff. I'm not talking about micromanaging, how much money you're going to spend in the grocery. I'm talking about, homes, cars, and so on, or investments. You have to make mutual decisions, because if I made a decision on my own and it didn't work out, she's going to point the finger at me and blame me. Or if it did work out, I can say, see, I knew what I was doing, and we're not aligned, we're not together. If we make decisions together and it works out, we can both pat each other on the back and say, hey, we did great.
There you go, you got the
And
four
for some reason it
cornerstones.
does not work out, then we can say, well, at least we were in it together, so there's no blame going around.
Great
Mutual
tips.
decisions.
Great tips, Ilya. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Of course, the book would make a great wedding present. All sorts of things, 4 cornerstones there. The book's called Multiplatinum Marriage, Going from Surviving to Thriving. That right there, it's available at Deseret Book and in bookstores all around the area. Thanks so much, Ilya, for dropping in today.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
All right, coming up, Studio 5 is looking for the best Sarah Palin lookalike in the state. The search is on, and you could win some prizes. So up next, we'll tell you about our contest.